what we want you to understand is anytime you're owning a property and you want to protect yourself, insurance is a nice thing to have. Insurance is transfer of risk, okay? I'm going to take this risk and assign it to this insurance company because I don't want to pay. But the ideal thing you also want to do is you don't want to have to get involved in anything. So we tell folks on a regular basis the 3 things you always need to keep in the forefront of your mind. And I tell folks this all the time. I don't care if it's from an insurance perspective or just a general risk and safety perspective. And I'm a safety nut. I'm the nutbag dad at the birthday party, so they give you the goodie bags. I'm going through it going, oh yeah, Tootsie Pops, garbage, pretzels, pencils, snap, throw them away. 4-year-olds don't need pencils. Tootsie Pops.
Apples.
Pull, my kids would pull on a Tootsie Pop, they knew that that was mine. One pull and it was mine, and they never pulled on them again. Because that thing gets pulled off, dislodged, it's done, it fits perfectly, you're done. When I gave a goodie bag out and where they're set up for, you want to avoid, prevent, and reduce your tenant from coming back to you or your tenant's family coming back to you and saying wrongful death, you should have done this, you didn't do this, I'm holding you accountable. On that same side of things, you want to push as much insurance, transfer, and risk and cost to everybody else involved in the process. So, your tenant, do they have insurance? How many of you here have properties right now where you require your tenants to have insurance? Excellent. Now, the next thing you want to look at is how much insurance do your tenants have, and is it enough to cover your building when they burn it down? Because guess what? Your policy will pay, but then your insurance record got affected by the fact that that tenant did the negligent act. We just want the negligent party to pay. All right? You want the negligent party to pay. Builder's risk. You're going to be your own subcontractor. You're going to contract everything out, right? You're going to do the work. You're going to hire this guy. Okay, well, look at your policy, because products and completed operations, which is quintessential part of a contracting exposure. That is, 3 years from now, when they rehab the second floor and it collapses, a lot of policies have products and completed operations excluded for subs if you're the GC. Insurance companies don't want to pick up that risk. These are what they call occurrence policies. There's 2 types of policies, that not 2, but the 2 main, occurrence and a claims made. Okay? Claims made simply says, when was the claim made? And you'll typically see this in employment practices liability and things like, sexual harassment, wrongful termination. The policy that's enforced, when someone comes and says, Mark, you fired me and I'm going to sue you, then whatever policy I have, that's when the claim comes in. Okay, occurrence says, when did the claim happen? And whatever policy was enforced when it happened is the policy that's going to play or pay and respond. Well, where the courts and the insurance companies fight is, well, they rehabbed it 3 years ago. It didn't show its head until it collapsed this year. Who's going to pay? The insurance company, for the folks that are on the policy now, are going to point back 3 years and say, who built it? Their products and completed operations is what is on the hook. And it gets into a real interesting fight. So if you're going to take on these things, we want to push down. Make sure all your subs have insurance. They have to have the right limits. You talk to your insurance professional and you say, I need you to evaluate my certificates. If you own a strip mall, each one of your tenants, do they have insurance? Are you named additional insured? And what does that mean? That means that gives you the same rights, honors, and privileges on their policy as if it was your own. So if you have a subcontractor, they're doing work for you, there's a claim, you're getting in a fight, I don't even talk to that sub. I call up that sub's insurance company and say, I'm Mark Bruno, I'm additional insured on this policy, I'm filing a claim. And they go, you're an additional insured, hold on, yep, okay, yes you are, we'll process the claim and get working on it. So additional named insured, pushing down that transfer risk, pushing it to everybody else. You don't want to pay for insurance, I don't blame you. That doesn't mean you don't want to have insurance. You want somebody else who's ever going to be responsible for your actions, you want them to have insurance. You'll see that. That's no different than you doing work for somebody. Some of you in here have other businesses. You get this all the time. Anytime anybody steps foot on your property, I don't care if it's your house, your business, whatever, they're going to touch anything of yours, then they better have liability insurance to cover those actions. You'd be surprised how many times people say, oh yeah, I had that person do that. I'm like, did you check their insurance? Did you check their certificate? No. I have a case, a claim, where a daycare center is operating out of somebody's house. And I'm there with the lawyers. We're going through a deposition on coverage, and the lawyer is like shocked at me when I say, yeah, I said, when you'd be surprised how many people realize the state of Maryland requires an inspection of your home to make sure that it is safe for kids in order for you to open a daycare, but they don't require insurance. They don't require insurance. Now, if you want to be a handyman, what's a bond? Isn't it like $50,000, right, in Maryland? You can't hammer and saw and carry tools unless you have a $50,000 bond, but you can operate and take care of kids for no problem. And in this case, a child was scalded, and you know the caregiver didn't have insurance, or a policy had lapsed. So we want to push down. Insurance is gambling. You're betting you're going to have a loss. That's why you buy insurance. Insurance companies think you're a good risk. Okay? So they, for a premium, they take on your risk. What you want to do is minimize the chances that you'll lose. Avoid, prevent, reduce. You can raise your deductibles. And I'm sure many of you, these are some of the common things you'll hear is raise your deductible. That's you betting on yourself when you raise your deductible. And that's you saying, you know what, I know me better than the insurance company does. I'm going to go ahead and raise my deductible. That's going to lower your premium. Okay? But if you have those things in place and you take that conscious effort to try to avoid, prevent, reduce, you're going to save yourself a lot of pain. Because how many of you have gone through a claims process? All right? Would you, I mean, some of them, they're either really great experiences or they're just god-awful, miserable experiences. And if you haven't gone through a claim experience, then I'm going to tell you right now, that is the best experience that you'll ever have. But ultimately, you can control a hell of a lot of it by remaining, diligent and conscious about what it is that you're doing. You're the landlord now. You're going to protect yourself, and you're going to go, if I was living here, what would I do? How would I prevent anything from happening? And put all those protective measures in place because, old sayings are true. An ounce of prevention, pound of cure. We really, believe that you can prevent yourself from being in a situation you don't like. Well, if you're flipping a property, you're talking about making sure you have the liability and property. And, again, you want to make sure you have the right amount. When I said $1 million, I always get nervous if those of you get in any kind of properties where there's mixed use, which is becoming more and more popular. Anytime you have people sleeping over a business that has an open flame. So I love it when I see restaurants and then apartments. I'm like, eesh. The claim is going to happen at 2 in the morning when everyone's sleeping. They're like, how do you know that? I go, because that's the worst case scenario. That's what they're going to predictive model. And so we really want to make sure you have all the liability in place. And when you see the cost for liability protection, it's really, we would tell you to raise your deductibles, look at other areas, and make sure your protections are in place.
When you say flipping, do you take title to the property? You never take title, you just assign a contract. You do take title, okay. Because if you're flipping, you never take title to the property, you just assign a contract.
Right. Well, and you get into some of that stuff, then it becomes your professional. Sometimes folks have professional exposures, whether you're into a real estate situation, whatever. So you really, if you're doing something with a name, there's a good chance you've got an exposure, and you probably want to talk to an insurance professional and make sure you're covered. And again, make sure that if anybody is going to touch your stuff, that they have insurance, because you don't want to have to fight with them whether or not they have money.
Good. One more question, then both Marks will hang around for questions. We got to be out of the room by a certain time, so go ahead, Chris, and then we'll.
A couple of maybe a few things. One is in residential rentals in Maryland, you cannot require any time to get insurance.
No, you cannot require, you cannot require them, but you can build it in. We've had people build it in. So I'm going to charge this rent, and included in that, you get a free policy. Okay? People say, well, but that'll take me out of the rental market. If it's taking you out of the rental market, it's protecting you in the insurance market, and 1 or 2 claims, it'll, you tell them they're getting a free insurance policy, and if you see how cheap it is to have renter's insurance, a lot of times people think renter's insurance, they'll go, I don't own anything, most of my stuff's not worth very much. Renter's insurance, you're picking up the liability, and that's what you want.
Just a couple more. With regard to lead paint, what riders are out there? What's the process for getting covered for the lead paint out there?
Yeah, lead paint and asbestos are troublesome. I mean, you can get certain companies to give you a rider for that. It's not cheap. Mediation is that we tell you to get it out. If you know it's there, get it out now. And if you're testing for that stuff, obviously before you take occupancy or put a knock. Otherwise, if you buy it, it's like anything else. We have mold, we have EFIT, we have all these construction defects issues. You can buy a policy for it, but it's expensive. Better to.
The last one is an umbrella. Can you reduce the coverage? If you own 10 properties, get minimal liability coverage on each property, and then get the umbrella. I agree with you. You have to have at least $1 million, but you don't have to have it on each property to get the umbrella.
Correct. So, but I would still tell you that, remember, it's in any calendar year a policy is. So you would want to be able to withstand 2 losses. If you have 10 properties, I would want to be able to withstand 2 losses. And again, what's your degree of negligence? If you have all the bells and whistles in your properties and the likelihood of something coming back to you, then you'll probably be able to get away with a $5 million or $10 million and kind of spread your risk over that umbrella. Put all the properties under one umbrella. You don't have a separate umbrella. But again, it's if you're not putting those safety precautions in place, then I would, for the price, I'd get some more.
So that's the key. You want to make sure that you can cover maybe 20% of your properties having the maximum claim in a given year.
I go back to what can you afford, and then planning for worst case scenario. So I'm saying 20% in this model. I don't know what those properties are. Again, how many people are in there? You have to just kind of plot that out and then go, okay, and then what's your degree of negligence going to be? You say, we got top of the line buildings, great. We have some folks that are dabbling in it. I usually increase their umbrella just because I'm not comfortable with the way they're managing the property, or with when I do a walkthrough. What they're calling a rehab, I'm calling, a facade. And they're kind of covering things up. Is it really a gut rehab? Yeah. Is it a gut rehab, or is it a fixer-upper thing? There's differences.